Hi everyone, my name is Sarah and welcome back to Everyday Consent. We had a lot of great footage with Robin last week, so here is part 2 of that interview.
Hi, I'm Robin Wilson-Beatty and I'm the founder of Sex Abled and I'm a disability and sexuality educator.
Let's talk a little bit about you. What does consent mean to you?
To me, consent is pretty basic.
Right.
It means I say, yes, you can do this, and I say, no, you can't do this.
Mm-hmm.
Or, this means no,
mm-hmm.
or this means yes.
Mm-hmm.
And, how to communicate that. Because people, consent, I've learned is also communicated in, different ways. It's not
mm-hmm.
always verbal.
Can you talk a little more about that?
Because sometimes, people aren't able to verbalize. Some people are nonverbal.
mm-hmm.
Like I said, I work in disability.
Mm-hmm.
And so, developing, communication styles where, like maybe a certain touch means
mm-hmm.
yes, this means no.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to communicate like that. More, nonverbal cues for consent can also, like, in the BDSM realm,
mm-hmm.
if you're being gagged and you can't talk,
mm-hmm.
How do you communicate that,
mm-hmm.
yes, this is good, or no, or
mm-hmm.
stop, or whatever.
Right.
So, developing, touches, signals,
mm-hmm.
that sort of thing.
What would you say was one of your most favorite experiences with consent?
One of my favorite experiences with consent was organizing a little sexual party
mm-hmm.
that I wanted at I was at a play party. I wanted to, participate in
mm-hmm.
an activity,
mm-hmm.
a group activity.
Mm-hmm.
So arranging with, with all the different guys,
mm-hmm.
And, asking them for what I wanted,
mm-hmm.
but also communicating, making, sure that, this is something that they would like to do.
Mm-hmm.
And, I found 8 people
mm-hmm.
who were very, who I was able to communicate that consent to and have a wonderful, sexy time.
How did you work with them consenting with each other in this experience?
For some reason, they kind of figured it out.
You figured it out?
Because the whole focus was on me.
Oh, okay.
So, which is what I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And so they didn't really so much interact with each other.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they basically, I could, tell, like, they all, like, communicated that, no, they were not interested in doing anything with each other. They were
mm-hmm.
interested in helping me
mm-hmm.
with the activity that I wanted to participate in.
So what did you really like about that experience?
I felt really empowered.
Yeah?
I felt, and that was also the first time I was able to do, like I said, since acquiring my disability, that mm-hmm. was the first time that I felt like, here,
mm-hmm.
I can organize this sexual event.
I can ask for something.
I can ask for something and get it.
Mm-hmm.
And my paralysis,
mm-hmm.
Doesn't come into limiting people, wanting to consent to play with me.
So we've talked about the disability community, but mm-hmm. are there any other communities that you're a part of that have a particular relationship to consent?
Yes.
Okay.
As you can see, I'm Black.
Are you?
Yeah, surprise, surprise. And I am a member of, a Facebook group
mm-hmm.
where comprised of, there's several people in there that are my relatives
mm-hmm.
and, living in, like, the country in Arkansas.
Mm-hmm.
So, and some people living kind of backwoods.
Mm-hmm.
So, but, thanks to the internet, we
mm-hmm.
can all communicate.
Mm-hmm.
And we're in a relationship group, how to keep a healthy and good relationship with your partner or spouse. There was a discussion when we were talking about consent because there was a man in there and he genuinely thought that a wife did not have the right to say no to sex because he was like, but it's in the Bible. And I I was just like, no. I was like, her body is her body. I said, you have to listen. I was like, you don't have a right just because you have a piece of paper that says that you were married. And there were several other people who also, and they were confused because there were a lot of women in that group who also grew up in that thinking, but they're like, yeah, I've had instances where, you know, I didn't want to, but I felt like I had to. I was taught that that's a wife duty. You always give in to your wifely duty. I mean, that was what I was taught. My mother is like, you know, she told me that, you know, sex was bad, but, you know, if your husband ever wanted it, even if you didn't, you just, it's your duty to give it to him because that's what part of being a wife and a woman was. I mean, and this is advice she was giving me in like the 90s. So, you know, I was like, no! But when you're in a culture where religion and, you know, what you're growing up with, you know, socially about what people teach you what marriage is and what that means, you know, in a community, then there are certain things that, you know, people have to unlearn. So I found that talking to, like I said, I am part of this community. You know, I'm related to several of the members that are in there. And you know, it's like I said, it's a rural black, you know, Southern, you know, community. And so, you know, talking to them about, you know, these issues of consent and what that means, you know, so that's education that for a lot of them, that's a new concept. Race and culture do play a place in our sexuality.
How have you noticed that race plays into this?
You know what? Society teaches what black women are good for. And how, you know, our consent has been violated for centuries. You know, the society, the messages that they give about black women and about, you know, about the desirability that impacts how you think about yourself, because you internalize these things. You know, I had, you know, internalized racism about, you know, oh, well, I'm not as desirable as a white woman. Like because I've dated guys before. I've dated some real assholes who were a lot more respectful about how they would be towards white women they were dating versus me.
That's no good.
Yeah, and I called them on it.
Well, thank you so much for talking with me today, Robin. If any of you have questions for Robin or just want to know more about what she does, then you can reach her via...
yes, on Twitter, I am @sexabled, where I like to tweet about all things sexuality and disability, as well as like marketing and disability advocacy. And you can also, in order to contact me, you can go to www.sexabled, SEXABLED, with robinwb.com.
Happy consenting, folks, and I will see you next week. And when I'm the main one talking, just like stupid shit comes out of my mouth.
She'll just be in the middle of a sentence and be like, so, I mean, I was saying blah. And I'm just like, what the hell just happened?
That's hilarious.
This is what I said.
And Topher's like,
Yeah, Topher understands.